So in the beginning of this week's Parsha Vaera, the pasuk says like this. The verse says like this: L'chein amar l'bnei Yisrael, Ani Hashem, Am Hashem, v'yitzeisi eschem mitachas sivos Mitzrayim, and I will take you out. I will take you out from the oppression of Egypt. V'itzalti eschem, I will save you, mavedasam, from your work. V'ga'alti eschem zeratuya, and I'll redeem you with my great hand. And then l'kachti eschem li'la'am, and then l'kachti, and I'll take you as my nation, which is in the next pasuk, in the next verse. So the first three expressions, v'itzeisi, v'itzalti, v'ga'alti, and I will take you, I will save you, and I will redeem you, is in the first pasuk. And the third and the second pasuk is the fourth expression, v'lakachti. And already the Megala Mukis has a spiritual reason why this is divided into two. The same thing also appears in other pasukim where it talks about the four exiles. But essentially, what we see from this is that apparently this represents a certain process, which means that it represents stages. That first is v'hitzesi. It's not a simultaneous event. First is v'hitzesi, I will take you out. From Mesivlas Mitzrayim, from like the oppression of Egypt, from the Egyptian oppression. Then v'yitzalti es mavos, and then I will save you from your work, from your avdus, from your slavery. And then v'ga'alti eschem, and then I will take you, redeem you. And then v'lekachti l'am, and I'll bring you to my nation, which is already first to Mount Torah. So in the process of going out of Egypt, in the exodus of Egypt, there were three stages. There was a process. V'yitzesi, v'yitzalti, v'ga'alti. Now, if you look at a parallel story, which is the beginning where Avram and the Bris Bein Absarim, in the original story when Avram is told about that his descendants will go down and become slaves, so the pasuk says that Hashem tells Avram that your descendants will go down to Eretz, they'll go down Geir Zaracha Be'eretz Le'lahem, they'll be foreigners in a land that does not belong to them, and V'avdum, they will be enslaved, and Ve'inu Oisam, and they'll be pained. So again, this is four descents. They're going to leave their own land. That's the first process. It's implicit, not explicit. They will leave their own land. They'll end up being foreigners in a foreign land. They will be enslaved, and then the slavery itself will be in a state of oppression, even a deeper level of slavery. Parallel to these three levels of descent to a land that doesn't belong to them, means to be a stranger in a land, to then to be a slave, and then to be a slave, and then to be oppressed. Parallel to that descent is the ascent out of Egypt. So v'yitzesi eschem. So if you read very closely the pasuk, it says v'yitzesi eschem mitachas sivlos Mitzrayim, and I will take you out of the hardships of Egypt. That corresponds to the third level of descent, which is that they will be oppressed. When does that occur? This occurs, Chazal tells, Marah says in Rosh Hashanah Yud Aleph, that already on Rosh Hashanah is batlu avodah ma'avesenu, that already the work, the hard labor was already nullified 6 months already before the Exodus story, which happens in Nisan. This happens in Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah time. So even though they were technically slaves, they were still enslaved, but the sivlos Mitzrayim, the oppression, was already mitigated. It was already over. That already happened 6 months before. V'itzalti eschem avedasam, and I'll save you from your slavery, which is on the night, the Medrash says that on the night of Makas Bechoros, even before they left Egypt, Parah said that everyone is free, which means you're no longer slaves. So that's the pasuk is very bedig, very concise, which says ma'avoidasam, for your work, which means they're no longer slaves. That's the second stage of the descent, which is they'll be in a foreign land, they'll be enslaved, and they'll be oppressed. So now there's no longer oppression, which already happens in Tishrei. On the night of the going out of Mitzrayim, of going out of Egypt, they are no longer slaves. And then v'ga'alti eschem, and I will free you and I will redeem you. This refers to in the early morning when they actually left Mitzrayim, when they left Egypt. So they're no longer foreigners in a foreign land. This process of descent parallels the process of ascent. So what's important to understand here, before we get into this a little bit deeper, is that the pasuk itself, the verse itself, is describing a process of redemption. A process, that's very important. Processes of reaching a point of redemption. So let's go to a Gemara. The Mishnah says, the Mishnah, in the beginning of our Pesachim, the 10th chapter of Pesachim, the Mishnah says, introduces this idea of 4 cups of wine, that on the night of the Seder, the night of Pesach, there's a mitzvah in the Rabbanan to drink 4 cups of wine. And the Mishnah says that even a poor man, even every person should drink wine. Everyone has to drink these 4 cups of wine. Now, in the Gemara itself, in the Bavli, which means in the Babylonian Talmud, the Bavli, the Gemara does not give a reason for these 4 cups. It just says you have to drink the 4 cups. That's already says in the Mishnah. Says Rashi. Rashi quotes a Medrash and also a Yerushalmii. So Rashi says that the reason for the 4 cups is Keneged Abba L'Shoina of Geula, corresponding to the 4 expressions of redemption. Amor b'Galus Mitzrayim, V'Yitzeisi Eschem, V'Yitzalti Eschem, V'Galti Eschem, V'Lekachti Eschem, Parshas Vaera. So Rashi says he quotes a Yerushalmii, which is a teaching by Rebbe Yochana, the great sage Rebbe Yochana. The Rebbe Yochana said that the 4 cups of wine corresponds to the 4 lashonos of Geula, the 4 expressions of redemption, the 4 processes, which means that drinking wine is, particularly drinking of wine represents a type of liquid, a type of drinking that is compounded or cumulative, which means if you drink 1 cup of water and then you drink another cup of water, you just feel less thirsty, but it's not an addition to the first cup of water. Whereas with drinking wine, every cup that you drink wine, you become more intoxicated, which means that it's progressive. It's a process. So just like the Pasuk speaks about a process of redemption, Vitzeisi, Vitzalti, Vigalti, and we say they represent different time periods even. That one represents 6 months before in Tishrei, and that one represents the night of the going out of Egypt. And then one represents the time they actually left Egypt, which is in 3 stages. The same thing also, we have to drink in stages and in processes, and one is compounded over the next, that we drink 1 cup of wine, then another cup of wine, another cup of wine, and the 4th cup of wine. That's what Rashi says in the Mishnah. Strangely enough, later the Gemara talks about whether the obligation of women, generally women are obligated to do everything as men on the night of the Seder. Then the Gemara says, Amar Rebbe Yehoshua Ben Levi, Rebbe Yehoshua Ben Levi says, נשים חייבות ב4 כוסות הללו, women are also obligated to drink these 4 cups of wine. שאף הם היו בויס הנספיק, they too were in this miracle. This is a classic teaching that's brought down in the Gemara a few times. It's brought down in Megillah with regards to Purim. It's brought down in Shabbos with regards to Hanukkah. That af hayim b'yis hanes, they too are part of the Hatzalah, part of the redemption. So therefore, women are also obligated to drink the 4 cups of wine. This is a mimer of Rebbe Yehoshua Ben Levi. This is a teaching of Rebbe Yehoshua Ben Levi. Also from the a teaching from Rebbe Yehoshua Ben Levi. It comes along Rashi. This is a Kuf Ches. And Rashi says, Abba Kaisis, and a woman has to drink the 4 cups of wine. Says Rashi, Shleisha kenege gimel kaisis shnemer b'pasik zeh, the kais par biyade. The 4 cups of wine correspond to the 3 times that it says the word kais, cup, when it talks about the cup of parai. And then the revi, birchas hamazon, the 4th cup corresponds to benching, the grace after the meal, the birchas hamazon. The question is, Rashi in the beginning of Pesachim said that the reason why we drink the 4 cups, he brought down the mimer of Rebbe Yochana that said that the reason why you drink the 4 cups corresponds to Vitzeisi, Vitzalti, V'Galti, L'Kachti, corresponds to the 4 expressions of redemption. So why does Rashi, a few pages later, in Kuf Ches, in 108a, why does Rashi say a new reason? Yes, it does say that it's a reason that's brought down also in the Yerushalmii by Rebbe Yehoshua Ben Levi, but why does Rashi bring down this reason when before he's brought down another reason? It seems that Rashi's making a distinction, saying when the Mishnah talks about drinking the 4 cups, which is an obligation for all, men, women, etc., then the reason is Vitzeisi, Vitzalti, when it's a general idea of drinking. But when you want to talk about in women in specific, then the reason is for the 4 cups corresponds to the word kais, the word cup, which talks about the cup of Pharaoh, the cup of Parai. But why does Rashi have to, what's the distinction, and why is Rashi saying this? So this is a question that's asked. It's not a riddle question, it's a simple pshat question, why Rashi changes. A very balabatish answer, a very simple answer, not a lomdish answer, not a very creative, but a very balabatish answer is that in the Gemara, in the Yerushalmii actually brings down that it was Rebbe Yehoshua Ben Levi was the one that said this statement. Rebbe Yehoshua Ben Levi said that the reason why we drink the 4 cups of wine corresponds to the kais of Parai, the cup that it says by Parai. So therefore, You could say a Balabatisha answer, a very simple answer, that the reason why Rashi's later on in the Gemara with Daf Kuf Ches, when the Gemara says that women are also Rebbe Yehoshua Ben Levi says that women have to drink the 4 cups of wine. So Rashi says and gives a reason why we drink the 4 cups of wine. So Rashi brings the reason of Rebbe Yehoshua Ben Levi. Since Rebbe Yehoshua Ben Levi is the one, the Baal Member, the one that says the statement that you have to drink the 4 cups of wine. So he says, so we're going to bring, he's going to offer the reason that Rebbe Yehoshua Ben Levi said in the Yerushalmii why we have to drink the 4 cups of wine. That's one Sarah. The Sdei Chemed has a teretz. The Sdei Chemed has an answer. The great Svardish scholar. The Sdei Chemed writes that the pasuk says, "V'tzeisi v'tzaltim galti," that I'll take you out of this oppression, out of the slavery, and I'll redeem you, which means that there was a shibud. There was a very strong level of oppression. It says the Sdei Chemed that if the reason for drinking the cups of wine correspond to the three, and then the fourth expression of redemption, leaving a state of slavery and shibud and enslavement and oppression, the women were not oppressed. It brings down a medrash. The women are not oppressed in the same way as men. Even though the Gemara that we have in the Gemara in Saita Yudbeis, the Gemara says that avodas perach was avodas nashim l'nashim v'anashim l'nashim, which means that there was some type of avodah, some type of enslavement or oppression. But it wasn't the same level of shibud. It wasn't the same level of slavery. We see that the women were free at some level, that they were able to walk around. Also, the Chazal talk about this at length, how the women would come to the fields, etc., which means that the women didn't have the same level of oppression. Says the Sdei Chemed, so the reason why Rashi brings down another reason, because when it's talking about that נשים are also, women are also obligated to drink the 4 cups of wine as men, so Rashi says that the reason is not because of V'tzeisi v'tzalti, which represents stages of freedom from oppression, because the women were not as oppressed. So therefore Rashi says there's another reason why women have the same obligation, that women should also drink the 4 cups of wine, because of the reason of the cups that are mentioned by Parah. That's what the Sdei Chemed writes. The Kli Chemdah, the great Polish Goin, the Kli Chemdah in Parsha Halacha Vaera, there's a letter of the Kli Chemdah to the Sdei Chemed. The Kli Chemdah writes a response to the Sdei Chemed, and the Kli Chemdah says that it's impossible, knowing you that you're such a great genius, such a great scholar, it's impossible that this reason was that you offer this reason, because if that's the case, that it has to do with shibud, has to do with enslavement, then maybe Leviim should also not have to drink the 4 cups of wine, because the tribe of Levi, the Shevet Levi, the tribe of Levi was not meshubad like Chazal or Derish. Chazal tell us that the tribe of Levi they were considered the priests, and therefore they were not enslaved. So then maybe they don't also have to drink the 4 cups of wine, and that would be a tremendous chiddush. You could say that they would have to drink a cup of wine because of the kos, but then Rashi should have said that as well. So that's a tremendous chiddush. That's a tremendous novelty to say this idea, and the Kli Chemdah dismisses this idea completely. There's another possible answer. It's a possible answer. I've seen this answer brought down. It's a tzarachian answer, but it's an answer. One answer is that the Gemara says in Brachas Tavchaf Pamid Beis, Chaf Alpha Beis, the Mishnah and the Gemara talks about this, whether women are obligated to say Birchas Hamazon, to say the blessing after the meal. What's the Gemara? The Gemara has a conversation there, whether the Mechuyev, they're obligated Midaraisa or Midarabanan, according to Torah law or according to the rabbinic law. And the Gemara says over there that there's a debate, and Rashi says the reason for that debate is because since it says since we say for the land that you have given us, and in the Birchas Hamazon, we're thanking Hashem for the land that was given to us, and since women did not receive an individual a portion of the land of Israel, they were part of the family together with their men, with their husbands or their fathers. So therefore, there's a possibility that they don't have to say Birchas Hamazon in Torah. So you could argue that since V'hivesi, which is not part of the 4 expressions, but it's the 5th expression, it says V'lakachti lilam, the 4th expression of redemption is by Matan Torah. Receiving the Torah, Hashem said, I'll take you for my nation. V'hivesi, then it says V'hivesi, I'll bring you to the land of Eretz Yisrael. The 5th expression is the land of Eretz Yisrael. That could be connected to the Kos Chamishi, the 5th cup, according to Reb Tarfon. It could be connected to the 5th cup, that there's some indication maybe this cup should be dry, have another 5th cup, or at least to pour a 5th cup, according to the Rambam, not to drink it. If that's the case, since part of this process was also to go into the land of Israel, to have a chelik in Eretz Yisrael, women didn't have a chelik in Eretz Yisrael, so maybe women wouldn't, if the reason for the drinking of the cups was only because of the four expressions of redemption, the five expressions of redemption, and since the fifth one has to do with going there itself, maybe women would be potter from drinking, would be exempt from drinking the 4 cups of wine. So that's why Rashi says another reason, that the reason is because of the cups, that the word kos that's expressed by the idea of pare. But that's a big tzarachin as well. First one, then you have the problem also with Levim, the same question. They also didn't have a chelik in Nachla, even though in the future they will have a chelik in Eretz Yisrael, but when they first time in Eretz Yisrael, they did not have a chelik in Eretz Yisrael in the land of Israel. But that's also tzarachin because you're attaching the 5th cup to the first 4 cups. Okay. Let's have. There's another reason. That's a possible reason. Another possible reason is ubehektim, that there's a Mordechai. The Mordechai asks a shaila. The Mordechai from the great Rishonim, great German Rishonim. The Mordechai asked in Pesachim. The Mordechai asked, why, if the source of the 4 cups of wine, that you have to drink 4 cups of wine, is from the psukim, from the verse that says v'itzeisi v'tzalti v'galti l'kachti, it says I'll redeem you and I'll free you. If that's the source, so he says, then why can't you take 4? Why does the Chazal say you should take 4 cups of wine? We answered already the question because it's compounded and it's cumulative. But the Marah didn't go in this path. If that's the case, then the 4 expressions of redemption, so then maybe we should take 4 matzah. Why 4 cups of wine? Why specifically wine? Maybe just take 4 cups, 4 matzahs, and the Mordechai says that the reason is because the reason why we take cups of wine, wine to drink rather than eat 4 cups of 4 matzah, is because of the psukim that speak about kos. The same thing, the same reason Rebbe Yochana Ben Levi speaks about kos, about the 4 cups, the cups that's talking about during with pare. That's why we drink cups of wine. That's what the Mordechai answers. This question is an interesting question. 4 and 5. There's 3 and 4. There's a whole opinionistic arichas, is a more internal explanation to this idea, the difference between 3 and 4 in Likutei Sichos on the Agada. What the Rebbe talks about the difference between 3 and 4 is Goimel Dalim. Goimel is from the Mashpia's perspective, the giver's perspective, and Dalim is from the Mekablim perspective, receiver's perspective. Matzah represents the giver, therefore Bala Matzah Yotza. You don't have to have a taste of matzah. Matzah represents something that's beyond taste, transcendent, chachma, and the 4 cups of wine represents bina, which is understanding. So therefore, it's 4 cups of wine. That's the pnimius. This is a deeper explanation. But let's just stay with the Mordechai a second. The question of the Mordechai is, why do we drink 4 cups of wine and not have 4 matzahs? Let's hold the answer from the Mordechai for a second and a hold. When Chazal when Chazal say that we should drink the 4 cups of wine, you could look at it, and apparently Tosefos looks at it this way, that it's Chazal kaveh that you have to drink cups of wine, just like, and Tosefos gives an example of just like Kiddush on Friday night, just like the Zechiyah of doing Zechira b'yayin, you have to remember through wine and to drink wine. And just like in Kiddush Friday night, Tosefos says that you don't have to not everyone has to drink, only the person is making Kiddush, minadin. So it's possible that the drinking wine is a certain type of kvias of Chazal in and itself. Or you could say, which is the other reason, and this is clearly what the Rambam was learned, is that it's a practice of cheres. Drinking the 4 cups of wine is a practice of showing freedom. It's an expression of freedom. To drink wine is generally a luxury, and to drink wine in abundance with 4 cups of wine represents a certain type of freedom, a luxury, that you're wealthy and you're independent. Here's the way the Rambam describes this the process of drinking wine on Pesach night. So the Rambam says like this: B'chol dor v'dor. This is a Rambam Hilchos Chametz and Matzah, Parsha Halacha Vaera. B'chol dor v'dor chayim laharis es atzma kilu b'atzviyat atzma mitzrayim. In every generation, a person, in the Mishnah it says chayiv adam liris, a person has to show, but laharis, the Rambam says, in every generation, a person has to show to others, laharis es atzma, to demonstrate to others as if he just left Mitzrayim. This is on the night of Pesach. Kilu ato yatzim Mitzrayim, as if he just left Mitzrayim. Then the Rambam continues in the next halacha. Lefikach, kishesoyed adam b'layla hazer. When a person sits and celebrates and eats his festive meal on this night of the Seder, on this night of Pesach, a person has to eat and to drink and to recline in a way, a practice of freedom, demonstrating freedom. And also, every man and a woman has to drink 4 cups of wine. Has to drink wine, 4 cups. What is the Rambam saying? The Rambam is saying is that there has to be on the night of Pesach a demonstration of freedom. You have to demonstrate that you're free. The demonstration of freedom is that you have to show that you're free. How does a person show that they're free? Certainly in a more ancient world where wine was more a luxury and certain reclining was not something that was done normally. How does a person show that they're free? By eating and drinking, reclining and drinking a lot of wine. That's a demonstration of freedom. So it's a demonstration of cheres. It's a demonstration of a luxury of freedom that you're free tonight. Now, the Rambam juxtaposes and very clearly links these 2 elements. The drinking of the 4 cups of wine, lefikach, therefore said the Rambam, and therefore what? Since a person has to show that they're going out of Egypt tonight, has to demonstrate that they're free, a person has to do 2 things. It has to show freedom in the way they eat, which means in reclining, and to drink wine. And they're one and the same thing. It's both an expression of showing freedom. Now you could argue this would be the svar. And that's the answer to the Mordechai. The answer to the Mordechai, why do you eat 4 matzahs, is because the drinking of the wine is not just because it represents these 4 expressions of redemption, but the drinking of the wine is an act that's demonstrating cheres. It's an act that's demonstrating freedom. So you have to eating 4 matzahs. In fact, is not a demonstration of freedom. You could even argue that it's a demonstration of meichel. It's a meichel ani. It's poor man's bread. It's bread of slave. This is the bread that we ate in Egypt as slaves, like the Abarbanel says, Evan Ezra says, which is slave food. So eating more matzah would not demonstrate freedom, but drinking a lot of wine does, and shows that it's cheres. Shows that it's an act of freedom. Now, since the Rambam links these 2, which is reclining and drinking wine, we know that in strict halacha, a woman is not obligated to recline. Now, Isha Cheshuva is obligated, which is a yotze min hakol, is a particular a certain type of woman maybe should, but in general, the general principle is that the mitzvah saseba, the mitzvah to recline, does not apply to women for whatever reason. If the expression of freedom, that there's an obligation a person has to demonstrate that they're free tonight. If there is no obligation, this far, if there's no obligation for a woman to demonstrate it, maybe she has to feel internally free, but there's no mitzvah for her to demonstrate her freedom. How do we know that? Because a woman doesn't have to recline, so maybe a woman would not need to drink the 4 cups of wine. If that's the svar, if that's the logic, and because the whole idea of the drinking of the wine is to demonstrate your freedom to others, and where is demonstrating the freedom, where is that cup, those cups of wine are connected to the 4 processes of redemption. So then you can say that Rashi, the reason why Rashi says the second reason, when it talks about the woman's obligation to drink cups of wine, because Rashi would say, if the reason is just to demonstrate freedom, processes of freedom, to demonstrate that you're free tonight, a woman is not obligated to do a seba. So maybe she's not obligated to do the 4 cups, because that's a demonstration of freedom. So Rashi says there's another reason, that the reason for the 4 cups of wine is not only to demonstrate freedom, and not only as an expression of freedom, but the reason for the 4 cups is also connected to the idea of the 4 cups with Yosef and of Parah, which is the beginning of the process of the whole story of the Exodus and the exile and Exodus into Egypt. That would be another svara. There's one other way of looking at it. There's a few other ways, but the one other way that we can look at it, which is a more deeper, more pneumistic reason, could be like this. The Gemara says, Rebbe Yochana Ben Levi says, that women are obligated to drink. And the Gemara says why? Because they too were part of the miracle, which the simple pshat of this means, and that's the way Rashi, the Rambam, in Megillah and Shabbos, there's different Gersois have this exactly. What's the reason? There's Tosefos Shtelzach on this in Megillah. That Afei Beis Hanes simply means that they were part of the oppression. That the story of Shibud Mitzrayim was also on them. That they were also enslaved on some level. They were also oppressed in the story of Hanukkah, oppressed in the story of Purim. And that's a simple reason. But Rashi doesn't write that. When Rashi says Sha'afay Beis Hanes, Rashi doesn't say that they too were oppressed. That would be a reason to drink the 4 cups of wine. If they're drinking the cups of wine, it's Shocher is freedom, they were also oppressed, and therefore they're free, so therefore they should drink, also women should drink the 4 cups of wine. What would be the difference between a man and a woman? So Rashi says, Sha'afay Beis Hanes, they too were part of the miracle. Rashi says something different. He brings on the Gemara in Sotei Aleph, and he says, "B'schar nashim sitkanish v'yisadar niglu." That it's not that they were part of the Atzala, that they were also oppressed and they were freed, but in fact, it's in the merit of women, of the tzidkanias, of the righteous women of that generation. In that generation, v'yisadar niglu, that redemption was in the merit of the women. So what does this poemic mean? We said there's a difference between process. That the 4 cups of wine represents process. You go from one stage to the next stage. First is v'yitzesi, then v'yitzalti, then ga'alti. First he take you out, and then I save you, which is 6 months later. You become, first you're no longer oppressed, then you become free people. You're no longer a slave, and then finally you leave Egypt. These are state processes of freedom. On a deep level, the entire structure of Gullus, the idea of exile, is by definition a process. What does Gullus mean? Gullus means, and that's why the word Gullus, the root of the word Gullus is Gal, which is a wave. Which is Gullus means, exile means that there is a certain destination that I would like to be, but I'm exiled from that destination. Let's say literally if a person's in exile from their land where they belong, their birth home. So I belong here, and now I'm not here, and I need to there's a process, there's stages in order for me to get back. I have to travel to get to the place of my destination. So process, tahalich, is connected to the idea of gullus. That's a wave, it's moving towards a certain direction. What is geula? What is the point of geula? What is redemption? Redemption is tachlis, is the end, not process. If you're getting to some place and you're not there yet, then it's still in a state of exile. When you're already there, it's a state of redemption. The Geula is the Aleph and the Gal. Geula is the presence of the oneness of Hashem, which is recognized within the wave, which means it's no process to get someplace. I don't have to be somewhere else. It's here right now. If you say Mashiach, the idea of Olam Haba is the world to come, which means that there's a process, that it's a proiser in order to get from this world to the next world, and the next world is yet to be. It's Olam Haba, it's in the future tense. That's the definition of exile, that Geula, redemption, is in the future tense. The concept of Geula, that's the definition of Gullus, of exile. The construct of Geula is that it's not a future, it's already in the present. That's the oimik, because it's the Nekudah, it's the present moment that has the redemption within it. Let's understand this in terms of what Rashi is saying. Rashi is saying that the process to redemption, vitzesi, vitzalti, galti, which is the process for us, when we were enslaved, and then we were becoming free in order to become vigalti, to get to the place of the gula, to get to the place of redemption, we had to go through a process. We first were, oppressed, then we're no longer oppressed. We're still slaves, now we're no longer slaves. And finally we reached a place of redemption. So it was a process to get to the point of the redemption. But since b'schus nashim tzidkanias nigalu, in the merit of the woman, we received redemption, the men received redemption, which means that the women were in a state that were connected toward the geula, to the present state. So this present and process, this presence and process. Process is to get to place. Presence is already that it's already here. The presence is the state of the redemptive state that brought about the process in order to get back into the place of the presence. So if you say that the women is the one that engendered, the one that created the reality of the process, b'schus, and the merit of the woman, nigalu, then the women don't have to go through the processes of yitzesi, yitzalti, v'galti, that I redeemed and I saved and I got to a place of redemption, because the women are the force that creates the process. So for the man who is enslaved, he has to go through states in order to get to the state of redemption. The woman who brought about the redemption is already in a redemptive state. Now, if you say that's the svara, what Rashi is saying in Boimik in a very deep level, that's what Rashi is saying. So then Rashi is saying, so then why would a woman have to drink the 4 cups of wine? If the 4 cups of wine represent processes of getting from exile to a place of redemption, from moving one place into the next, which is a process to get to a place of redemption, but women are in their inherent state, is the merit of the women. The men actually received redemption, which means they're a place already connected to the gula, to the nukuda, to the presence, to the point which is above the process. So then, what do they need the process? Why would they have to drink the 4 cups of wine? That's why Rashi says that the reason why the women have to drink 4 cups of wine is not because of Yitzesi, Vitzalti, V'galti, L'kachti. It's not because of the process, because women don't need the process. Because B'schus Nishrutzkani is Nigalu. The women actually brought about the process. They're beyond the process. So why do they have to drink the 4 cups of wine? The reason why the women have to drink the 4 cups of wine on the night of Pesach, that's what Rashi says, is the reason of Rebbe Yehoshua Ben Levi, because it's connected to the cups of Parei. And according to this, it becomes very clear why Rashi, when it talks about generally the 4 cups of wine, which is a process, and it is compounded. And that's the whole idea of wine, that it's a process to get more intoxicated into higher and higher states. And we're getting deeper and deeper into our consciousness and deeper revelations, because it's a process to get to the place of redemption, to get to the place of the 15th state of the Seder, to get to the place of Yichidush Nefesh, to the point of unity. Then you need processes. But women don't have that consciousness, because women already are in a state on some level beyond the process, or because they're in the state of Geula, they're in the state b'schus nafshus kanas nigula, which means they're connected to the state of the Geula, which is in general a woman is connected not to mitzvah seishos magram, time bound, because woman is outside of time bound in that way. It's not about process, but it's about presence. So since women are connected to that reality, they wouldn't have to drink the cups of wine. So why do they have to drink cups of wine? Because of the 4 cups, the cups that are mentioned, the 3 cups that are mentioned in the story of Parei. All right. Have a wonderful week. Good luck.